and I know I mentioned already as went in an earlier time in this series, is the notion of curiosity as a meta skill for nonviolence. So I think of the idea of life as a learning laboratory. And I like this quote I found a while ago from James Stevens that said, "Curiosity will conquer fear even more than bravery will." And I really, really appreciate probably curiosity and gratitude as two of the muscles that most help me to stay like relaxed and resilient, especially during challenging moments. So I want to speak just a little bit about curiosity and learning as ways in which we can stay relaxed even in difficulty. I found it useful to get acquainted with how people process information because it's helpful for me on a daily basis to have mercy on myself, especially as I'm understanding more and more that most of our mental processing actually occurs below the surface and far faster than we can consciously track. And from having worked on my patterns and transforming my patterns and working with, at this point, probably thousands of people over the years, one pattern that I've really noticed with a lot of sorrow is how swiftly many people will use new ideas kind of against themselves, if you will, as if we ought to have already known something. So when we hear someone bring an idea to us, sometimes we have this knee-jerk kind of conditioning of, oh, I ought to have known that. And so I like when I hear a new thing, instead of using it to build a case against myself or being harsh. Oh, you should have known that already. I can be like, that I didn't know. That was new. I didn't know about this truth for you or this truth for me. The energy is generated by our internal judgments, which is encapsulated by thoughts like, I should have known that. Maybe I wonder sometimes if that should energy helps somehow to glue new learning into place. I was just speaking about this with a friend yesterday about that once we age past maybe 3 or 4, when we need to be constantly comparing ourselves in order to be able to pick up language, pick up how to use our bodies, pick up social cues, there's a part of me that wishes that we could stop comparing ourselves so much with other people, because after a while I think that becomes like a limiting factor in our ability to really become who we can be. So when I think about learning and being open to finding out new blind spots in myself, I've sort of had an idea for a while of seeking to be an expert at becoming an amateur. And I want to be happy to be an amateur. I want to be happy to be someone who's continually at the beginning of things. That keeps me humble. And I like to cultivate the observer in me too, which is an increasing, doing this over years has really led for me to an increasing ability to take other people and events less personally. That helps me to cultivate that all-important space between the stimulus and response that I talked about earlier. Because the space between stimulus and response is where a lot of my creativity lives. It's like, oh, this happened. Even if my initial conditioning response is, oh, I don't like that, there's enough of my other kind of interest now in going, oh, I don't like it. There must be something really good in this for me, something really juicy. So I can learn to replace judgments of myself with others with empathy if needed, and then curiosity. Curiosity is, it really is a meta skill for my practice of nonviolence, and it helps to connect me to humility and to a relaxed awareness of my own limits. Now, for me, a lack of curiosity about a situation is more of an indication of internal low resistance, or internal low resources, which is a signal for my organism to pay attention to what's missing, so it's not a problem. It's just if I'm not curious about what's going on around me, it's just another sign that, oh, you need rest, you need water, you need food, you need to put down the pencil, back away from the computer. You need something different. Gandhi's autobiography, as I may have mentioned already, My Experiment with Truth is a book that I often recommend because of his just passionate commitment to learning, passionate commitment to being an amateur. So I love that he did that, especially at the height of his public career, that he wrote that book. And I liked his public willingness to change his mind and acknowledge change, instead of acting like, no, I always thought that. He would say, no, this is a new idea for me. Someone asked him, well, what do you think about X? And he said, I've changed my mind all the time because I keep learning. So if you want to know what I think about something, look at the last thing I said about it, and that's the truth for me now, which is going to keep changing. So I wish there were more public figures who are able to acknowledge change and perspectives as being natural and essential. We all need that permission. So, I don't know. Curious to hear your thoughts and reflections on this, Thomas.
I have plenty. Your first point about curiosity being more powerful than bravery. I myself have experienced this recently in my own mind and experience. When you've got things that are weighing on you, and you try and buckle up, or whatever you might term, to kind of face it, that when instead you just ask questions, because questions, of course, can be connected to empathy and treating yourself like a human as opposed to something that should have done something, or, as you mentioned later, the internal judgment that we often have for our thoughts, decisions, and action, or whatever it might be. So I found that really a really powerful statement, that curiosity is more powerful than bravery. It also led me to think about this a man called Ben Zander, I think his name is. He's an orchestra conductor, and he's got an awesome TED Talk. Just Google Ben Zander TED Talk, and he says when something goes wrong in life, when something bad happens, you think something, just say, how fascinating. And really approach with a whole ton of curiosity, and obviously a very positive. I could learn something here. So when you also said that, when something's going on inside me, I think something really juicy is happening. So I think all those 3 points are pretty cool.
I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts as well, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feel free to type in a comment or a question on the questions channel, be it something from your own experience, or be it any questions that you have for Kit on this. And of course, you can also put your hand up, and we can come to you and unmute you for a little bit, and you can say one or two things, or we can have a little chat. Oh, by the way, Kit, I've started reading My Experiments with Truth. Your book recommendations on this little conversation are being heard.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody, by the way, if anybody on the call reads a book or watches something on nonviolence and you want to write up a blog on it for our website, and I'd love to keep that fresh perspectives and fresh voices. So we've got a lot of interesting blogs, people thinking about nonviolence on our website, and if any of you want to write and contribute, it'd be super fun to have your voice and experience included on there.
Mm-hmm. One thing jumped out at me before that I'd like to talk a little bit more about, this idea of changing one's mind. We see more often than not in politics, when politicians change and they call it like a flip-flop. Oh, you thought this, now you thought this, that's terrible. And I've always thought that was ridiculous, and to an extent. I think obviously we'd like people to do their due diligence and think things carefully through before they come up with a policy. Other times, to have the level of national debate that's required, you do need to propose a policy, and then it gets everyone focused on it, and you look at it, and then you might change your mind. And I've always thought that wasn't necessarily by default always a bad thing, changing your mind. And of course we can think of the harm that can come when people don't change their mind, say on climate change. which you mentioned earlier. I really hope that people who have been very against climate change don't just stay that way because they think they need to, should do, or whatever. And I really hope that they obviously change their mind. So I'm just curious to know, your thoughts on people changing their minds and why they do that and why they don't do that, and any thoughts on that for us.
I think there's requires a kind of some maturity to be able to change your mind in a relaxed way, so that so that it doesn't become defensive about your earlier perspective, but more are relaxed and say, yeah, I thought this, and then this new information came in, or this new experience occurred, or a new person entered my life, and now I see it differently. I see it now like this. So so that's for me is part of just that sort of acceptance and humility. That's and really being willing to cultivate that observer, and then be able to speak to it. And sometimes when we learn new things, there's also a mourning process that's required, because we might have made choices based on our former perspective that now when we think about it, we really grieve. Oh, if only I had known this, if only I had known that. I wish I'd known this, when I was making this important decision. I've had many people speak to this, when they were learning nonviolent communication, sometimes in a retreat or something, and they just hear an idea or a thought or a strategy, and there's a mourning that's required, because they think, oh my God, I wish I'd had this when my children were small. I wish I'd thought about this when I was still married. I wish I'd known to, have this conversation with my father and mother before they died. So I think one of the things that sometimes blocks learning and growth is how we struggle to mourn. So for me, mourning is also an important part of learning. I want to just mourn that I only know what I know, and then just keep going. Instead of defending my old choices with my life, I want to be able to just mourn and acknowledge my human limitations that all of us have. So I think that relates to it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think when we start observing ourselves and realizing that we're human and not, but making it okay, I guess, for us to say that we were wrong and that was okay because we had a different set of information or perspectives at that time. I think the challenge might come then and when we're dealing with people who don't have that level of introspection or think that they're not wrong, or whatever. I'm just thinking about the wider cultural norms, I guess, about and what we say publicly when someone comes out saying, actually, I was wrong, and almost not turning them into heroes per se, but just like being grateful for that as opposed to throwing a whole lot of judgment at it. I think what it means to come out and say that you were wrong, that should be we should place that more as a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing. We should reframe that, I think.
And this is one of the exciting things for me about how, some of our science now that we rely on so heavily in these Western, dominated thinking society, because so much of now the science about, how our brains work, really is super humbling. How much of our decision making goes on under the surface. How the fact of all of us having confirmation bias, which is we have our narrative, and our brain super helpfully only brings to our conscious awareness stuff that confirms our narrative, rather than things that would ask us to change our perspective. So, I'm really interested in just having mercy on this is our brains, And then some of it's our cultural conditioning, which, we spend our whole lives getting out from underneath the cultural conditioning. And I'm doing this whole look right now for me at, as myself as someone who's a leader and a manager. I'm looking at some of what I do sometimes as a leader and a manager, and I'm like, how much of this is kit, and how much of this is my conditioning as a female? I don't know, but it's an active question for me right now.
We've had some comments come in actually.
Great.
Here we go. This is so relevant for me right in this moment. I received an email while entering the conference that brought up a reaction. I am appreciating the invitation to stay curious, to explore my reaction, which is giving me more spaciousness to empathize with the other person here. That's cool. Another one
I want to say before you say another comment is that I want to, if your first reaction is I just processed a similar thing that happened for me earlier this week. Someone said something at our staff meeting. I had an irritated reaction to it. We just sat down and talked about it. So, but there was a lapse of 72 hours in between, and that was super helpful for me because I needed to understand what was happening. If I'm irritated by something that someone says sometimes, not always, but increasingly for me, it's because there's some truth in what they said that I need to look at. But it's not the whole truth in terms of how I experience it. So I don't want people to use these ideas against themselves. If you're irritated by a message that you received, don't think your irritation is not important. It is. Pay attention to it. Have some compassion on yourself. This wasn't an easy message to receive. And then end up as quickly as you can, but as compassionately as you can, at curiosity, at wondering in relation to the other person. But you don't have to force it. I think if you force it, then that's more harm that you're doing, and you're not building trust in yourself by forcing anything. Sorry to cut you off there, Thomas.
No, it's good. That's great. We've got another comment here saying, I think being humble is so important, even when you have an intense knowledge of something. Keep the beginner's mindset. And another one here saying, whenever I notice myself becoming critical of others, that is my sign that I'm low in resources. I also tend to think that's what's behind the criticisms of others. It may not be accurate, but it allows me to feel more patient. I'm thinking of curiosity as a natural state, all too often obscured by fear of essential needs going unmet. Not sure what courage is other than curiosity or love reaching out. And we have a question here. Do you have any thoughts to share on when our curiosity is experienced as uncomfortably intrusive or intimate by another? How to hold this with care?
Sure. Yeah, and like a couple of thoughts. I mean, whenever something that we do doesn't work for another person, then our choice is to blame them, blame ourselves, which we can do with lightning speed. I call that being blame-dexterous. Or you can do the hard work of just being like, I bet sometimes if someone's told me that I didn't do something that worked well for them, even after all this time I have practicing these ideas, it's still kind of a shock in my system. And like a part of me, like, I don't want to hear it because I am so connected to my good intentions, perhaps, in what I was doing. So I mostly just want to give myself a chance to calm down about it for the minute or longer that's required, depending on the size of the message and how challenging it was in my system to hear. I also want to pay attention to context. How resourced am I in the moment? Am I feeling great when I hear it and in a relaxed space, or is it catching me at the end of a long day or a busy week when I'm basically kind of essentially on my last nerve. So context matters greatly. So that's one thing. And then curiosity, I think, is important to pay attention to, especially when our curiosity maybe relates to other races, religions, classes. That sometimes that curiosity may not at all land as a gift. It lands as a sense of obligation of, now I have to educate another X person about me and mine. So, but my perspective on that is that we just do our best. We mess up all the time. We mourn our limitations as frankly and as swiftly as we know how, and then we move on. I mean, that's kind of life. So I wouldn't want you to stop, this person who wrote the question, I don't want you to stop being curious. I want you to, is there something that you can learn about the way that you express that curiosity that might be helpful for the next time you want to try it? Is there some piece of mourning that you might want to offer the person for whom it didn't land in a good way? Was it that this is a painful question for them because, whatever sets of reasons? And then just to be frankly able to just hear in as undefended a way as you can what it was like for them. Yeah, but to not take responsibility and that it's making you into a bad person. You're a human person who has existential limits, so of course you can't really know what it's like to be inside another human being.
We've got another question, or another comment here rather. It says, I should have been speaking up about Aleppo so much sooner going on in my mind. I have found some empathy for myself and others around this, but the should comes up again and again. I think it points to grief, but I don't want to be just stuck in mourning. I want action.
Yeah. I have so much trust in our systems. And for me, if there's something that is persistent, doesn't want to go away, it's because I'm not done. My system doesn't fully trust yet that I've taken in the learning that I need to. So I might even try to get into some kind of relaxed space in whatever way serves you, And for me, that probably would be some sort of prayer-like space for me, where I would just ask for, what else do I need to know in order to be able to really trust that I can forgive and move on from this. And that's not like a one-time only deal. I mean, there's choices that we make that really have sometimes enormous consequences for other people, and we might spend the rest of our lives mourning our human limitations in the moment. Sometimes I think that's life. It'd be nice to be able to package things up in a tidy way, but so far my experience is that life is messier than that. And I hope whatever this thing is that over time that you can really learn to get even curious as to why is this message so persistent with me? Why is it that I'm struggling to trust myself? And I haven't learned what I needed to learn yet on that particular situation. What is that? It'd be interesting to do that inquiry for a while and see what happens.
I mean, I too have been seeing what's been happening in Aleppo and realizing it's been 5 years. I mean, yeah, and I think the should repeatedly coming up. So what you're saying, Kit, is that if we've got shoulds in our mind that keep coming up, it's our system telling us that we haven't quite finished processing that, and to get back into that curious state, to really hear and see what we can learn about ourselves from there, so that next time we see a conflict starting, we can we would have learned to take action earlier, or we would have learned why we didn't take action earlier. and can act sooner to um, make sure these kinds of conflicts don't happen to this anywhere near this scale again.
And maybe it may be our integrity nudging us. Maybe we didn't do, maybe there's more we could do. Or maybe this has happened to me a couple of times. Like something's happened, I've had my individual response to it, but later on, the systemic aspect of the learning may show up because I'm still learning how to be a better systems thinker in my analysis of situations when they occur. So maybe later on, oh crap, I could have done that comes in, because it wasn't just about maybe making amends with that individual or mourning my own limitations. And maybe this was actually, this conflict or this problem was really pointing to a bigger situation that I didn't really have an understanding of until now. So that's I often play catch up within myself on the systems aspect of issues as well. So, and I try to be again, merciful to myself on that. I wasn't trained to be a systems thinker from the ground up. I've been, adding it to my skill set as an adult, and it's still not instant for me.
And oh, by the way, keep adding in your questions and your comments. We'd love to hear from you. Kit, so often, this work requires the will and a level of strength to face some of the things that we don't necessarily feel comfortable facing. Often I'll scroll through my Facebook feed, for example, and find something on there that, disturbs me. Sometimes I'll choose to share it or comment on it or, look it up online and read more about it or write a letter to someone. Sometimes I can't handle it and I'll just scroll down to distract me from it, depending on the level of resources I guess I have at that moment. So, having the presence of mind, the state, the skills, the strength, the resources, whatever you'd call it, to do this work, whether it's to face a difficult conversation with your father about not really talking to your mother for 18 years or whatever it might be for each of us. Have you got any thoughts on when we notice that we perhaps are low on resources to be this introspective, what we can do or what practices we can put in place to help us ensure that we have enough resources to do this quite important work?
Well, I would circle back to some of the things that I was speaking to. I think it was last time around the idea of a lived practice of nonviolence. The daily practices that or whatever, so I listed mine. I imagine many people have them, like what roots you during difficult times. And the times these days I'm experiencing is super dynamic. And for many people, even more challenging, even if they were challenging previous. So our old support structures and our old ways of doing things may be insufficient. So we need to keep updating. And so I think it's important to not think that you're what you used to do will still work. Not just because of the external circumstances, but that over time, your own what you're asking of yourself, your ask might get bigger of yourself. I used to just want to do this, but now I want to do this and that in relation to either a political issue that I care about or an interpersonal one. So in the workshops I've been doing for some local leaders here, I've been really challenging people to make their support systems abundant and redundant. So if you have 2 people that you can currently call up to really process stuff, get 4. If you have 4, try to find 8. Try to have people that can really help you think things through. I have a really sizable list of people that I can call or track down pretty quickly, generally, because there's so many of them where I can just say, I really need a thought partner on this. I want someone else's brain added to mine for me to think through how I want to respond to this. Um, so I think we just need to keep adding and taking that seriously. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And it was a good reminder for everybody. I did actually edit that those 4 points around a lived practice of nonviolence to a 10-minute clip, and I'll perhaps include it as a link in here. It's well worth listening to. It's all the gems from one of our earlier webinars. This idea of a support system kit, I remember being at Findhorn, and one of the big takeaways that you and Dominic Bada were highly recommending to everybody was basically that, I mean, you both said we couldn't do the work that we do in this world without our support system. You know, make sure you have the support system around you to enable you to, you know, be who you need to be and feel supported to do the work that you do. And I hear your point now about finding people who you can call, making it abundant and redundant. What else would you recommend in terms? And obviously there's this lived practice of nonviolence. I mean, have you got any other thoughts for us all about, you know, developing that support system? Because I feel somewhat lacking in that regard, and being someone who likes to help other people, oftentimes you don't ask for help yourself. So I just wondered if you had any more thoughts for us on this idea of a support system.
Well, if you're someone who often gets tapped by other people for an ear, my suggestion is to at a time when you're not being tapped. So it's not when this other person has called you up in a need, but at another time when you're outside that particular moment of their needs, to say, hey, you know what, I'm finding that I want to increase my support system too. Could we be mutual? So if this is someone who you think can help you think things through. I think, you know, many of us can look around and find, you know, an elder, someone from our neighborhood, someone from our faith community, someone from our workplace, someone whose perspective has been nourishing for you at different times, and ask them, is it okay if, you know, it's pretty flattering for people to hear, you know, I really appreciate your perspective. Could I lean on you now and then in relationship to challenges when I'm having them? Because I think your perspective would be something that would be really helpful for me. And of course, if I call you and ask you, 100% want to hear a no if I'm catching you at a bad time, and just see what people say. We can be brave. We can also find each other. You know, like if there's a bunch of people who are looking for that kind of support. I think a lot of different groups doing lots of different work. Certainly, you know, people in the Nonviolent Communication Network, but there's lots of other networks out there. Like in the States, I'm thinking of the Pachamama work, Joanna Macy's body of work. There's reevaluation counseling. There's just so many different modalities, as well as all the ones that faith communities offer that are out there. So to find people. And for me, I have just deeply read some teachers such that their perspective is pretty embedded in mine now. I've, you know, really read Gandhi for years. Really read Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron. Like I can just hear her voice in my head in a lot of circumstances now. I have King's voice sometimes in my head in different circumstances. Increasingly Howard Thurman's voice in my head. So you know, I'm super rooted in these people, none of whom I've ever met. 3 of whom aren't even alive at the same time as I am right now, but their perspective nourishes me every day. And even if I'm shy, I don't have to ask permission to read a book. The other thing too is I just really want to put a word in that if something troubles you, if you did something and you screwed up in some way, or you perceive yourself as having screwed up in some way, it's okay to go back later and ask people about it. I think it's actually more skillful to, if there's a dynamic or something that occurred between you and another person, I think it's more skillful to try to address it when you're not both sort of temporarily imprisoned by the dynamic, but to speak about it at another time. For instance, me and my husband realized years ago that speaking about money, which is the ongoing challenge in our relationship of our different perspectives on money and how to think about it and manage it. I know no one on the call here knows what I'm talking about. That we realized that if we spoke about that when we were tired, especially like on a weeknight when we were both kind of just coming in after a long day, that a deep conversation about money when we're not resourced was a recipe for problems. So we just stopped doing that. We basically we set aside specific time to look at, talking about money, talking about finances, only on weekends or times when we've really got the resources to bring our best selves to the conversation. We just know that, So, okay, that's not a problem. That's just, getting the 411 on each other.
That's, thanks. I will be using that. It's super interesting. I remember I had to give someone some bad news one time, and we did some yoga together actually, and then after that we were sitting outside, and I knew that was a good time to do that, and I knew that it was right to wait until we were in a space to have that kind of conversation, how we would both want to have that conversation. And she actually mentioned later on that she was very grateful that that timing was selected when we were both fully resourced up to have that conversation.
Yeah.
We've had some comments come through and some questions. This is on a similar note to that, actually.
Can I say one thing? I want to make a sincere offer. I have the Cliff Notes to my own personal Cliff Notes to this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And if anyone wants to email me, I'll send you the Cliff Notes. I pulled them up right now. And one of the things that I wrote from this book, which is an enormous book, all about like how much of our thinking and decision making is not conscious or really even anything that we can control. One of the things that says that we have found that people, when engaged in a mental sprint, were effectively blind. So if someone's busy doing something, like, and of course the perfect example of that is the YouTube video that teaches people about implicit bias. I think I might have mentioned it. It's the one about the moonwalking bear.
Yeah.
Check that out. So if you're with someone and they're engaged in some kind of a mental effort, then this is not the time to try to bring a dynamic in like this. It's just they don't have the resources for it. So, and you can also know when someone's trying to bring you something when you're engaged in an effort. You can just say, you know what, this matters to me too much to try to talk about it right now. I don't have the bandwidth for it, but I really want to make the time for it. But it's just I'm predicting that if we try to go there right now, it won't work out really well. So we make a time right now or later, just to be aware that these aren't problems. They're just they're the operating instructions we need to find out about each other. Sorry, go ahead.
Sure, I will say one thing on that quickly. Can you send me those Cliff Notes? I will put them on the cloud, and people can click a link and download them if they wish to.
Outstanding. I'll do it right now.
It might be easier than you dealing with a bunch of emails.
Thank you.
Probably have a lot.
Hooray for
hundreds of.
Hooray. Thank you.
This was a comment, I'm guessing in response to when we were talking earlier about, when we want to sort of hide from challenging things in our lives and in the world. And it says, for me, it's very much about being able to say no sometimes and find time for solitude. Meditation and rest are as vital as food. And I can definitely attest to being rested and having done my daily meditation to give me the resources to feel more capable in facing what I need to face.
Mm-hmm.
Question says, Howard Thurman? Who was that latter name?
Howard Thurman. Thurman.
Perfect. Thank you. I do enjoy the suggestion to embed the words of great teachers in us through lots of exposure. Yeah. It says, make lists of people who you'd like support from, if only you dared ask, of people who are already available so that you expand your answers of the support you are already taking in, of people who can support you in your work in the world, of people who can support you emotionally, etc. Then start contacting them and making support agreements. What kind of support are they willing to offer? Are they available to be phoned? Within what hours? For how long are they willing to be on the phone? And how confident are they to be able to say no? Is it a good, if it's not a good time? Yeah, do they want to split the time half and half or just entirely be available for you, etc. So you know the parameters that will make you willing to risk calling them in a given moment. Then keep your list up to date and expanding it. Any thoughts on those suggestions, Kit?
I just love the structure of the ideas.
We have another comment here saying, meditation is for me the key support system that brings me into connection with everything. The meditation I close with a quote from Jula Ludin Rumi. And it says, I do not find it in English. It basically says that you should take care of the day as it is life, essence of life. Yesterday is nothing else than a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. Living in the present moment makes yesterday into a dream of luck, and tomorrow a vision of hope. This helps me to root. Yeah. And one of your suggestions of living a practice of nonviolence, Kit, of course, was to make time every day to find some peace and to pray or to meditate or whatever it is for you. There's a question here saying, not sure I caught the name of the YouTube video. Is it Moonwalking Bear? And yes, it is. And yeah, watch them. Just give that a Google too. It says, would you be willing to send a collection of the books, links, etc. that Kit recommends in the emails? I am sometimes not able to note them. Do you have a reading list of sort of top 10 books that Kit Miller recommends people read?
Are you asking me this?
I am asking you that. There's a question from...
I do have a list, and I'm happy to send it. Yep.
Yeah, send it to me, and I'll include it in the follow-up email from the call.
Okay. Yeah. And I just sent you my cliff notes from Thinking Fast and Slow.
Oh, look at that. Thank you. Another comment here says, I found the book Heretics by Will Storr really useful and interesting to understand how our cognitive bias works.
What's the name of the book again?
Heretics. It's by Will Storr, and Storr is spelled S-T-O-R-R. There you go, Kip. Yeah, for me, I think it's really a good reminder from you, probably the third week in a row, to read the original words of these people, not the filtered version or the perspectives of the words, but the words of King, of Gandhi, of other people. So I thank you again for that reminder. And you said, is it Pama Chaldron?
Children, yep.
Can you just, I'm not familiar too much with Pama. Can you give me or us a little introduction?
Yeah, she was a student. She was a mom and kind of a normal human being who, like, I think sort of midlife became interested and then got completely immersed in Buddhism. And she was a student of a very well-known Tibetan teacher named Trungpa. very controversial, brilliant dude. And anyway, she's written some books that just have kept me glued together, especially after my daughter passed away. I read her out loud every day for over a year. Anything that she's written is on my list of favorite books. So her books are all over the place too. So it's Pema, P-E-M-A, and Chodron, Chodron. I highly recommend her.
Thanks, Kit. We've got about 5 more minutes, so I would like to do a few things in that time. Any final comments or questions, please send them in. I think now is also a good time to start thinking about anything that we're grateful for. Again, if you didn't share one earlier, feel free to share one with us now, and if we've got time, we'll read them out. And Kit, perhaps we can finish as always with a story from the Gandhi Institute. Have you got anything interesting that's happened in the last week that you'd like to share with us that you're grateful for happening? I'm sure very little has happened in the Gandhi Institute in a week.
It's a little like, yeah, it's hard to know sometimes which thing to go to. I'm super appreciative of the response that people are having to the workshops and the kind of focus we've been having on the topic of hate and hatred as sort of this. For me, it's like a fundamental issue that's underneath many of the other issues going on. Hatred, self-hatred. So I had a chance to speak to that on a radio program here on Monday and got some good feedback, both on the air as well as since then. So maybe we could focus on some of that topic next week if that would work for people. So I'm just grateful for the interest in this topic, which was kind of thrust upon me by reading Howard Thurman. He just has such wisdom on the topic of hatred that I couldn't not talk about it with other people. So yeah, it was a really good opportunity to speak directly about, how do people who want to engage in what's called protesting, how do people who want to engage with conversations with people who think differently than they do, what does all that have to do with the topic of hate? So it would be fun to speak about that next week.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
My version of fun.
Oh, we had someone say, yes, how can we learn more about the topic of hatred? And I think the answer is Howard Thurman and tuning in this time next week. Well, yeah, I'm glad that we got those 10. I'm grateful for this working out so well after the challenges we had at the beginning of this call. It seemed like a distant memory now, thankfully.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us through that, and of course for attending today. I found it the conversation immensely interesting and useful. Kit really appreciates really specific feedback. So if you do have any thoughts of things that you did like, or that any suggestions or any comments, we'd love to hear from you. It always makes Kit and I smile when we get an email from you with some really specific feedback about something that really resonated with you. So please feel free to email us if you wish. I will say finally that I'm grateful for being warm today because it's cold, and when I go outside at the moment, I'm just so glad that I have shelter. I think I take it for granted all too often, so that's something I'm grateful for. Cool. Well, yeah, I guess finally, if you'd like to support Kit's wonderful work, you can make a donation at thegandhiinstitute.org. And of course, they've got a cool store with some stuff in it that you can get stuff too, including those Gandhi deck cards we've mentioned a few times now, which is one of the ways that I have my live practice of nonviolence is to read those cards. Oh, and we've just had a flood of little people come in and say things they're grateful for, so I'll read a few of those. Feeling grateful for Kit sharing her resources, cliff notes, etc., and for you putting them out there for us to access. Thank you for the technical problems, so I did not lose information as I was a few minutes late. We did actually have quite a few people join the call about 10 minutes after we started, so that was good. Thanks for this great conversations. Grateful that you're offering these principles and meta skills such as curiosity. They serve to help generate and organize my life energy. That's a nice one to finish on. Any final thoughts from you, Kit?
No, I'm thinking of a friend who told me she's been listening to these talks while soaking in the bathtub. So I'm just grateful for the chance to be contributing to all of you. These are wonderful days for us to get super clear and super grounded in our humanity and to really bring it forth like a light in the world. So this is just a joyful thing for me to be spending my time on, and I'm grateful to all of you. If it was just Thomas and I talking, that would be fun. But all of you being along for the ride is very joyful. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks again, Kit, for your time and insights, and we look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Hey, everybody. Bye-bye.